Welcome to Two Guys in a Podcast. I'm Tom Waite.
And I'm Mike Cardinale.
Today we're going to talk about our military experiences, some stories, share some stories with you.
We call them sea stories in the Navy. I don't know what the Marines call them.
We don't call them sea stories. But we're going to have some fun. We'll talk about our military experiences, kind of where we've been, what we've done, and maybe some ideas on if somebody's interested in joining or I don't know. Maybe
I'm going to give you my recommendations. I don't know what Tom's going to do.
I don't know. I'm going to tell stories.
When we get there.
I'm going to tell stories.
So let's get after it.
Shut up and sit down.
All right, so like we said in the intro, we're going to talk about our military careers and why we joined.
Absolutely.
So I'll take you back to 1980s, we'll call it. I was maybe what you would consider a troubled youth. Got in a lot of trouble when I was younger, just being a knucklehead. And it was actually my brother, who's now deceased, who kind of told me, you need to get some direction. So
Did he tell you like that?
No, he said, listen, you little asshole, you need to do something with your life. That's more how the conversation went.
I would imagine, yes.
But, I was just running amok, and to put it nicely.
How old were you at this?
I was 16, 17,
okay.
Probably. At
right.
17, I was, running amok, just being a knucklehead. And I dropped out of high school. I think I was 17, and lived at home for a while, and my parents finally said, you got to go. So my older brother, Rusty, said, you can come live with him. Come live with us. It was him and his wife and his young daughter.
So he was quite a bit older than you?
Yeah. He was, I think, 6 years older than I was.
Okay.
So I'm like, cool. So I worked odd jobs and whatnot, but I got a job with him. He worked for the cable company, climbing telephone poles, which was kind of cool. So I was like 17, 18, climbing telephone poles, hooking up cable, just living the dream. But that dream quickly ended. Well, actually didn't quickly end, but I still was just being a knucklehead. So I was living with him about an hour and a half or so away from home, but I would come home on the weekend, still running amok. So he's like, Mike, you should think about going in the military. I'm like, bro, I'm not going in the military. F them guys.
That ain't for me.
I lived in Monterey. I'm from Monterey, Seaside, California originally. So, my dad was a fisherman, and I used to, be on the wharf, causing trouble, drinking at a young age, hanging out with my buddies, love to my buddies, and just causing trouble. So he started getting tired of my nonsense, and he was a partier himself. It wasn't like he was a saint.
Right.
And so one day he took me down to the Navy recruiting, and Navy was a natural fit. My dad was a fisherman. I grew up on the ocean.
Yeah.
Got seasick a lot too, by the way. But I was just like, all right. So I went and took. It's kind of a funny story. I went and took the exam. Took the ASVAB, and I got like an 88 on it. The Navy said, well, you must have cheated because a high school dropout with your education should not be able to get that type of score. Yeah. And I was like, I told my brother, F them, I'm done. I'm not going in. And then one thing led to another, and he's like, I told my mom, and actually my mom wrote a letter to Leon Panetta, if you know who that is.
Yeah.
I actually still have the letter from 1986 when Leon Panetta, as a congressman at that point, signed a letter saying, give this kid a shot. And whenever a congressman lights up the military, they respond.
Sure, absolutely.
So I took the test again, and I think I got a 60-something. So they said, okay, that's much better. That's much more appropriate for your background. So anyway, I was like, whatever.
Typical.
So I joined the delayed entry program for like a month, and I was a submarine designated quartermaster. And as I was 19 I was 18 at the time. I turned 19 in the delayed entry program, and then I left for boot camp 3 weeks later. But I had no idea what that meant. I didn't have any family that I knew of at that point that was in the military. My uncle was in the Navy. I didn't know it at that point. My two uncles were in World War II. I didn't know it at that point. That information wasn't shared back in my day. So there I was,
Off to boot camp.
Yeah, and I remember the first time. I keep looking down. I remember the first time I saw tears in my dad's eyes, and it's when I told him I was joining the Navy.
Tears of joy?
Yeah, I think he was just like really shocked.
Like, boy, you're stepping up and doing something.
Yeah, because again,
yeah.
Boy, the stories my parents could probably tell and my friends could tell, but it was just a whirlwind because it was. I had joined the late entry program like February 18th of 1987, and I went off to boot camp March 24th. So it's a fairly short thing, and it was a rude awakening because again I had no military background, no experience.
You didn't really know anything
military.
about it.
I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into,
huh.
And
this
think
was 88, 87, 88?
Yeah, 87.
Yeah.
And I remember my recruiter, believe it or not, Casey Gately. I don't know, Casey, if you're still kicking, you're still alive. I'm sure you're not in the Navy anymore. But, I never really thought about looking the guy up until I just said his name in Facebook and social media. He did a good job. He did what he could to help me. Because back in those days, high school dropouts, like today, you can't even get in the Navy as a high school dropout.
Right.
You can't get in the military as a high school dropout.
Yeah, they're very selective.
And back then, I didn't know it, but there still was a small percentage. You had to get a ASVAB over 50. There's some requirements you had to make before you could get in. I didn't know. Yeah.
Huh.
So anyway, that's my short, brief story to start of my career.
So you, in essence, joined the Navy to find a direction.
Yeah,
or to get a direction.
No. I did not join the military at all for that reason. I joined the military because my brother said, "Go you need to get your ass out of here and go do something with your life." So yeah, that's my short story. So why did you join? What was your motivation? Oh, well, actually, let me go back. It was not to get any direction. It was to get my butt out of town and stop getting in trouble. Because I was going down a road of...
not good.
Not good. I mean, I was probably...
So that's what I meant by a different direction.
But it's not something I wanted.
Oh, other people kind of recognized that and said, "Yeah, you might need to go do something."
If it wasn't for my brother Rusty, I would have never joined.
Okay.
And I probably would be in jail, in prison, or maybe not even alive. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because that's the path I was going down.
Okay.
Running the streets.
Right.
It wasn't like I was gonna, join for like my kids, for example. It wasn't like my son who would join to get college education, or to go learn a skill or anything. Mine was to
get off the streets.
To get off the streets, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, what's your story?
Yeah, my story. Graduated high school, worked for a year, didn't really have a direction. Kind of just worked some odd jobs. Then I went to Ferris State University for a year.
Oh, nice.
Hooked up with my roommates were all on the basketball team. I was kind of going there with the delusions of grandeur of trying to make the basketball team.
White man can't.
If I would have actually had any discipline, I probably could have made it. I didn't have discipline. I didn't have discipline for school. I didn't have discipline for basketball at the time.
Right.
So that summer came back to the Western Michigan area, Ludington, Pentwater area. Buddy of mine, Dave, that I went to high school with, my best friend Dave, he wanted to join the military. He wanted to join the military right out of high school.
Oh, nice.
He got injured, and he couldn't go in the military. He actually got injured in a camper. A window similar to this, he put his arm through from the outside, actually. So he had a really bad cut, and his hands, his nerves and tendons were deformed, and so when he saluted, he had a little crooked thing. So he actually signed up for the Army, and he was in the delayed entry program for the Army over a year, which is not really technically allowed. It's supposed to be 12 months max. Right?
It's just those creative things that recruiters do. So
anyway, we had an apartment together up in Ludington, and we were sitting there one day. He's working an odd job. I was working an odd job. We didn't really have very good direction. And he said, well, think about joining the Army. He says, I'm already in the Army. I'm getting ready to go to the Army, or whatever.
Right.
So the Army recruiter came over to our apartment, and he was sitting across the table from me in the kitchen. And he was telling me I could be all I wanted to be, you know. And I said, well, if I'm going in, I want to be Airborne Ranger, you know, I want to be Green Beret, the whole deal, right? And meanwhile, my buddy Dave is off to my left, and the recruiter can't see him. And he's sitting over on a couch, and he's just sitting there kind of laughing at me, asking all these questions about, okay, if we go in, we want to go in together, we want guaranteed infantry, you know, we were thinking we were hard chargers and we were going to go get some. So my buddy Dave excuses himself and leaves, and about 15 minutes later comes back, doesn't say anything. I'm still talking to the Army recruiter. He sits down over there, and he's holding up a poster of the Marines, and he's going like this. Turns out the Army wouldn't take him. That's why he was in the delayed entry program so long, because of his arm was messed up, his hand and stuff.
What year was this?
This was 89.
Okay. I just want to make
No,
sure.
I'm sorry. This was 90.
Make sure that we understand Tom's in the same age bracket that I'm in.
Yeah, this was 90. This was the summer of 90. So finished up with that recruiter. Said, hey, it sounds good. I didn't really sign anything, but I was like, all right, maybe what's the next step? You know, what can we do?
Right.
And then he leaves. And my buddy Dave's like, come on, we got to go to the Marine recruiter real quick. So we run down there, Sergeant Freed. And he throws in these videos, you know, these hard charging Marines getting some and everything. And the office was all set up really cool and stuff. And we're like, man, this is awesome, you know. And he's like, well, my buddy Dave said, will you take me with my hand like this? And he made a phone call. He called to his command.
Right.
Talked to some major, I think, and said, hey, we got a couple hard chargers here, you know. They want to sign up right now. One's got a little deformed hand. His pinky and his ring finger are a little deformed. Can we get a waiver? And that was back in the day. They didn't have like, text me a picture or something, right? It was nothing like that. There was nothing like that, right? So he just over the phone said, yeah, we'll take him.
Nice.
So we signed right there. Boom. We signed up. So we went into the delayed entry program.
Right.
And about 3 or 4 weeks had passed. We were going over to Sergeant Freed's house once a week or something and learning the general orders, you know, prepping for boot camp and stuff with a bunch of younger guys. We were both a couple years older. We were pushing 20.
That's old in recruiting years.
Yeah. Well, and then he calls me one day. Sergeant Freed calls me one day. We were supposed to leave November 5th. We signed up in like September.
Right.
We were supposed to leave November 5th because we wanted to go immediately because we're thinking, well, we don't have the money for the apartment, you know. you know.
Right.
So he calls and says, hey, I can get you guys out October 24th. And I was like, all right. Click. Dave comes home from work and says, hey, good news. We get to leave 2 weeks early, the 24th. And he was just, and that was in like 10 days.
Right.
And he's like, what? He got a little upset because he was like, oh, you didn't give me any time to think about that. Oh, well. So October 24th, boom, off to... Funny story. The day we left to jump on the plane to go to boot camp, or no, I'm sorry, to go down to Lansing to the MEP Center or whatever.
Right.
Then to get on a plane. But anyway, the Army recruiter was coming back to pick me up to go take a test to get in the Army. So we hid upstairs. We saw him coming and he was knocking on the door. We were up upstairs apartment. So we hid until he left. And then after he left, Sergeant Freed pulled in literally 2 minutes later.
Nice.
Picked us up, took us down to Lansing. Yeah.
So just so you know, because I did 4 years as working in the MEPS station.
Yep.
Running people through.
Yeah.
I was basically the office manager, supervisor, whatever. I did all the interviews and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I ran the office. But then I did 4 years as a recruiter.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that hey, you want to leave October 24th versus November 5th is because they were trying to hit their shit.
Oh, their quotas. Yeah, absolutely. He made no bones about it. He's like, I got openings. Yeah,
we got to get you out of here.
Slots.
We got a goal to hit.
So, yeah. So anyway, that was it. And then we were off to San Diego. I went Michigan. Michigan goes to San Diego for boot camp. Michigan and Texas.
So from a financial perspective, I went from California to Florida.
Yeah. For boot camp?
Yeah. So you think about it.
So that is odd.
Because
I would have thought they had something in San Diego.
Well, so they had 3 boot camps at that point. They had Navy boot camp in Great Lakes, in San Diego, and in Florida. Okay. Now there's just one in Great Lakes.
Yeah, but you didn't go to San Diego?
No, I went to...
I bet they do that on purpose. I bet they send the local kids from a recruiting center to a different one.
I don't know. I do know that my follow-up A school was in Florida, and my follow-up C school was in Connecticut.
Yeah, so maybe that was why. East Coast.
Yeah, probably.
So, that's kind of how we both ended up in the military. I honestly, again, like I said, didn't have much direction. I wasn't getting necessarily in trouble, but I certainly wasn't doing anything productive.
Well, and I think what it points out is that people join the military for very different reasons.
Yeah.
Some join because they don't have direction. Some join because they're in trouble. Some join because they want money for college. There are, with 8 years of recruiting experience and hundreds of interviews with people, there are countless
A million
reasons.
different reasons.
Yeah.
I had guys in my squad that a couple of them joined for college. I think at the time Illinois was paying full tuition at a state school if you did 4 years in the military.
Nice.
So I had a kid, Davis, that he joined just for that.
And think about this, Matthew McDade. I'm gonna get his name right instead of calling him Thomas. He joined for a different reason.
Yeah.
So if you talk to people, they all join for different reasons. And as far as the educational benefits, I was a high school dropout. I got my GED.
Yeah, that didn't really attract you.
No, I was like, what? $100 a month for I don't care about that. And I remember they said, do it. We're not really asking you. We're telling you do
it's
it.
a smart thing to do.
I signed up for the Montgomery.
Did you use it?
Well, we'll get to that in a little bit, but
because
the answer is yeah.
Yeah, I did too. All right, Mike. So when you joined boot camp, how long do you think it was for you to have two reactions? One, oh crap.
That was instant.
And two, all right, this is good for me.
So to answer your first question,
get off my bus.
No, it wasn't.
That's in the Marine Corps. That's get off my bus.
No, so we got.
That's when it starts.
I traveled to Florida from California, and I can't remember. We left in the late afternoon, and by the time everything happened, we were getting into the barracks at like 1.
I think they do that on purpose.
Oh yeah,
we did the same thing. Yeah,
like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, something like that.
Yep.
And I remember very vividly laying in the bottom bunk at the end of the hallway, at the end of the barracks.
Bay,
So you get bunk beds, bunk beds,
like a big
whatever.
squad bay.
And the moment I realized that I'm in too deep was when they started throwing trash cans and yelling at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Get up.
Now, mind you, with no discipline, no military background, no anything, chip on my shoulder, I was like, what the F is this crap? And I didn't really move really quick and instantly in my face about it. And it's that shock moment.
Yep.
Because I think some people have an idea of what was going to happen when they went to boot camp.
Yeah.
But I literally didn't know anybody that went to any
no
type of
clue
boot
at
camp.
all.
So I had zero.
You're just walking in the door.
Yep, I had no idea.
Yeah, that could be a pretty big shock.
Yeah, so it was culture shock.
What about when you decided, all right, this is a good thing for me?
It was at least 2.5 years later.
Was it?
Yeah, because Matthew said on our show, he never expected to do a career.
Right.
So I never expected to do a career. I didn't know what a career was. So I'm a day, even today I'm probably a little bit of a day-by-day guy. But I remember I was on a Westpac, and QM1 Kresge was my mentor. Great guy. I don't know where he's at either, but maybe I'll look him up. But just a hot running guy, and he had his stuff together, and he was transferring, and I had just come to that particular boat from another boat, and the command master chief said, Cardinelli, we're going to need you to step up your game because Kresge's leaving and you're the next guy in line. And I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, I kind of knew what that meant. I'd had 2.5 years in the Navy at that point, so I kind of knew how things worked.
Sure.
But I still really didn't. I was about chasing women and partying. I mean...
Yeah, you got a job now and you got money and, whatever.
But yeah, so I kind of said, oh, crap, you mean I'm going to be responsible for other people?
To kind of hit you.
And at that point I realized it's not all about me. It's, you got to start to learn how to be responsible for other people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that was a definite turning point for my career. Because before that, I didn't study for exams. I didn't, go above and beyond. I didn't do anything that didn't
You were just
support
there.
me.
Yeah.
Right? after that, I started studying for exams. I started helping other people study for exams. I started staying
Looking for
later.
opportunity.
Just really digging into it. And I think that was the real change in my professional career. So I was probably 21 at the time.
When you were in boot camp, like looking back on it, at the time, did it seem hard? And then looking back on it later, it wasn't really that bad.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was that way for you in the
Yeah,
morning.
yeah, absolutely. Same thing.
I mean, we didn't.
It's like, holy crap, what is this guy? What is this? And for people who don't know, if you haven't watched something like Full Metal Jacket or any of those, because that was pretty. I mean, that Emery, that guy's he was a real Marine Corps drill instructor.
Right.
Anyway, they tear you down. The first phase of boot camp is they tear you down, both mentally, physically, emotionally. They tear you down, and then they build you up. And that's all by design, and it's all kind of scientific or whatever, So, but while you're going through it, it's like, holy crap. And then what I found is I started doing things that not that I didn't think I could do, but I would have never done, right?
Right.
Like running 3 miles under 18 minutes, right? Which I did once. But I never thought I'd do it.
Right.
And I did. I'm not really a runner, per se. I was a sprinter, not a long distance.
Right.
But anyway, other things, right? You see the O course for the first time, and you go out and they show you how to do everything, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is not going to be good. And boom, get through it, like no big deal.
Well, I think one of the things I learned is seeing other people accomplish it.
Yeah. Well, you start building that teamwork and that, you start pulling for each other, and it's really an interesting dynamic I found. Looking back on it, at the time, oblivious to all this, right?
Yeah, you're in the moment.
But looking back on it, it was really, like, I still tell stories from boot camp about other people and or with those people.
Right.
And we share stories that maybe I forgot, but they remember, or, I remember and they forgot or something. And, looking back on it, once you get out in the fleet, in the Marine Corps, once you get out in the fleet and you start actually training out there and stuff, you look back on boot camp as your beginning and everything in the military, but you end up, like, I know at least I did, I respected the hell out of my drill instructors after the fact.
Right.
After we got out, right? And near the end, they start becoming more of that father figure, more,
Right. Mentor.
Yeah, I actually ran into a couple drill instructors. We were going to school, Marine combat training after boot camp, and then School of Infantry. Both Dave and I went in guaranteed infantry. He got 0311, which is the basic rifleman. I got 0351, which was an anti-tank assaultman demolitions guy. So we went to Marine Corps combat training together. We went to School of Infantry together, but in the same place, but he was learning different things than I was learning. So during that time, a bunch of us went back and visited some of our old drill instructors down at MCRD San Diego.
Nice.
They had picked up a new class and everything, and we went in and saw. So we walk in, and they told us in boot camp, some of you idiots are going to come back here and visit us. And you're going to have your running shoes on, a pair of shorts, a Marine Corps shirt, and a Marine Corps jacket, all satin, fancy, And I'm thinking, no freaking way, idiots that do that. Yep, we showed up, a bunch of us like that. But here's what they did. They took us into what's called the DI hut, the drill instructor's office. And we were in there sitting there talking just like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely just like this. I brought up the story of my mom's not a baker at all. During boot camp, I was in boot camp over Christmas.
Okay.
So we got 21 foot lockers full of stuff from parents and cookies and candies and cakes. And I was in boot camp during Desert Storm. So the ground war of Desert Storm, way back in 90 or 91, started while we were in boot camp. They let us watch a little bit of it on TV and stuff. Because they were like saying, this is where you guys are going.
Right, be ready.
They had no idea it was going to end 100 hours later and all that garbage. But we had so much candy and stuff that they found excuses to throw it away and get rid of it. And they'd plant gum under someone's pillow, and then they'd come out and find it immediately and grab 2 wall lockers, pour it on the floor, everyone stomp on it, crush it up, throw it in the trash, because we had so much. We were giving it to other platoons. We sent some overseas. We sent some to Saudi Arabia or to Kuwait. But anyway, my mom's not a baker. She baked a big box of chocolate chip cookies.
Nice.
And during mail call, they call you up and you got to open it.
Yep.
Oof! Open up a cardboard box. There's a bag in it. Open a bag. Smelled the chocolate chip cookies. Everyone did, and it was just. I was thinking, please let me eat one of these chocolate chip cookies. I never saw a single chocolate chip cookie. The drill instructor took it and said, "Go sit down. You're not eating these." And for 3 days, I smelled chocolate chip cookies on all the drill instructors' breaths. I was so freaking mad. And so anyway, when we went back and talked to them, I brought that up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, those were great cookies." You know, I was like, "You son of a."
You know, it's funny.
I was so mad.
I had a similar story because my mom sent a big box, and I used to smoke back in those days. And cigarettes, even back then, were cash money, right? I don't know about your drill instructors, but ours, I remember getting the box, and I also remember it was like 2 or 3 weeks into boot camp. Everybody that got a letter or a box or whatever had to do X amount of push-ups before they could accept their letter.
Yeah.
And
you had to earn it.
you know, they were handing out letters, handing out people call the, and I'm thinking there's a box sitting up on the bench. You know, I don't know about Marine boot camp, but in the Navy they had, you know, the bunk beds, and then there was benches in the middle.
Yeah, not for us, but we had our foot lockers that we'd stack up as like a tabletop or whatever.
Yeah, there was, if I remember right, there were 2 benches, and the box was sitting on the bench, and I was thinking, please don't let that be mine, please, because I knew I was. And sure
all
enough,
of a sudden they know your name now.
Right at the end of mail call, and I don't remember what they called me, just recruit Cardinelli or whatever. Post, and you know you gotta walk up. You got to use facing movements to walk up correctly, and then you gotta report. You gotta address. Yada yada. And I just remember he was in my face, just screaming at me. Do you miss your mommy? You know, and just spit, bad breath, and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mom had cartons of cigarettes, and I remember the cigarettes because I was like, you know, you couldn't go to the store and buy cigarettes.
Right.
And I smoked probably a half a pack to a pack a day back in those days. And anyway, I had to do a ton of push-ups, but they took everything.
Contraband.
And I'm like, they let us keep a little bit of food in our lockers, little snacks.
Yeah, not us.
So, but if I remember right, they took everything else, and I think there was 3 cartons, not packs, 3 cartons of cigarettes in there. Well, what I found out later is both the drill instructors smoked Marlboro
They
Red
just
Box.
got a bunch of cigarettes.
They just got a bunch of cigarettes.
That's funny.
I did get a couple of packs if I remember right. But, yeah, just, you know, I think the thing about boot camp was, like you said, they tear you down and
they build you up. Yeah, and we had, like, were you guys able to smoke? Like,
yeah,
even if they
we
would
had smoking lamps were
oh,
lit,
really? Yeah,
like
we
twice
didn't
a
have
day.
any
I think it
yeah,
was what it was.
Yeah, not in the Marine Corps boot camp when I went. We didn't have any.
But
that wasn't even an option.
I think in the second week, I actually lucked out because I got picked for the well, not really picked. I was in the drill team, but I didn't get to throw a rifle around, which I was kind of bummed about.
Yeah.
I would have sucked at it anyway.
Yeah.
But so every morning, I can't remember, it's like 4 o'clock or 4:30. There were a bunch of us that got up
To go drill.
So we didn't do all the nonsense with the rest
Right.
of the unit. And I think there was, I want to say 100 recruits in that company.
Yeah, when I went into boot camp with the build up to Desert Storm, a normal platoon when I was in was normally around 60.
I want to say there
50
was
to 60,
100.
but we were well over 100. Yeah. Every platoon going through the base at that time, the drill boot camp at that time were maxed out. I mean, they had 100 and I think we started with 123 and graduated like 112 or something.
Yeah, we definitely lost people. People got pushed back for medical reasons or whatever.
We had a guy that joined us that was dropped from an injury, and while he was with us, he got injured again. And they gave him the option to go home, and he said, "No, I'm staying. I'm gonna rehab, and I want to go through this again."
Right.
He went through boot camp in essence, and he got dropped late with us, so he had been through almost 2 full boot camps, and went back for a third because he said, "Nope, I'm gonna become a Marine. I'm not going home."
Right.
And he ended up making it, but 3 boot camps he had to go through. So by that time he's like a veteran, you know. He's like an old salt. He was like, "Yeah, you can get up my face and yell all you want. I don't really care. I know that's going to end at some point."
Yeah. So for any of you parents that are in Tom Tom and I's age group, for anybody that's in Tom and I's age group that have kids that would be old enough to join, listen to the stories of others. Go out and find out. But there are experiences that you're going to have in boot camp that you should have without knowledge of beforehand. I mean,
Correct.
There's things that you should deal with before that you need to deal with while you're there versus, hey, Tom, when you go to boot camp, this, and this is going to happen.
Yeah, you can't go in prepared. Like, if you go in thinking you know everything or thinking you're prepared for stuff, you're wrong. First of all,
Right.
And number two, you won't get the best out of it either.
Right.
Because literally, they in essence teach you to forget everything you know, and then they teach you everything they want you to know. Basically, people call it brainwashing and stuff. It's not brainwashing. It's not. It's motivation. It's inspiring. It's because you're there for a reason. I mean, if you get this right, you're not joining a tennis club. You're not. You're joining a chess club. You're joining the military, and whether you're going to be a cook, or a submariner, or infantry, whatever you're going to be, a tanker, whatever you're going to be. In the Marine Corps, which is, by the way, a department of the Navy. So the Marine Corps isn't it's a branch, but it's under the Navy. It's Department of the Navy. It's the best part of the Navy. But
Short of the submarine.
yeah, sort of the submariners. But and then maybe the SEALs, but okay. But when you're joining in the military, every Marine is a basic rifleman. And so if the crap hits the fan, you know what? Cook or no cook, you're a fighting person. So, and the reality, look at the last 15 years, right? 16 years now, since 9/11. It's serious. It's a serious situation.
Yeah, serious business.
And the seriousness has gone up and down, but what's maintained is the level of recruitment, right? So someone today may join the military for a completely different reason than you and I did.
Yep.
Someone today may join the military for the exact same reason.
Well, and 9/11 really changed the way that we looked at that, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I mean, look at just recent events. We lost 16 people, I believe, in that the C-130 crash.
The KC-130.
There was 15 Marines and I think it was 15
9
Marines.
of them, I think I read today, 9 of them were from MARSOC, so Marine Special Operations Command.
Yep.
They were raiders in MARSOC, and the crew was in the plane.
And there's always one. So just to clarify something for the Marines is the Marines they don't have their own medical. So
Correct.
The Navy
Navy's
supplies hospital corpsmen. We call it Fleet Marines. I think they call it Fleet Marines.
Fleet Marine Force.
So they go and they're embedded with the Marines. They are basically
They
Marines.
did our Doc Jacobson. Shout out to him. I'd love to reconnect with him. And Doc Cook was in our machine gunner squad or a platoon. But they were Navy corpsmen. Navy uniforms, the whole deal.
Yep.
But they did everything we did.
Yep.
I got some pictures, and I show people of my squad. I was a squad leader in Northern Training Area in Japan for land nav and navigational training and jungle warfare and everything. And I have pictures of my squad. And in the picture is our corpsman. And I try to ask people, pick out our corpsman. See if you can pick out our Navy corpsman, right? They get it wrong every single time. And I said, well, it's this guy. They're like, no way, that guy looks like Rambo. I mean, that guy, our corpsman was a hard charger.
They're hardcore.
Hard charger. They don't mess around. And the ones that I've had experience with took their jobs completely serious.
Well, lives are on the line.
Yeah, and they, like they really looked out for the best interest of everybody. I had kidney stones when I was in the Navy. And our corpsman came back from downtown Honolulu at 3 a.m. and rushed me to the med center after being out partying all night. When he could have just had the A duty take me down. No, he stayed with me the whole time. And I mean, they build that relationship with you, and they're just as much a Marine as anyone else. You know, military's military. There's this there's the Navy, Army, blah blah blah. The Air Force, yeah, okay, those guys they're all like, I think we all agree the Air Force is okay, whatever. It's a job. But the Navy, the Army, the Marines, all of them, the Air Force, Coast Guard, it's serious. And there's an esprit de corps with everybody that you're in the Navy with. And it's more today than ever because of, the seriousness of the situation, if you will. So it was serious when we joined, probably, or at least for me. I got it. I was joining. We were going to war, right? So we were like, oh yeah, let's go be Rambo, you know. And we never saw it. By the time I got out of school of infantry, when I got to Hawaii, I got stationed in Hawaii, which is pretty awesome. But we got to Hawaii, and our 3 days at the receiving barracks before they actually were doing paperwork and all that stuff. They came in and said, we want volunteers to go over to Iraq or over to Kuwait right now. And what it was is the war was over. Desert Storm was over. You're guarding ships and offloading equipment and everything else. My best friend from boot camp or from School of Infantry went, volunteered. I didn't. I was staying. I wanted my girlfriend at the time to come out. We were going to get married. I had this whole thing, right? In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have went with him, with 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. They went over there, got to experience the desert, do the training and everything. But it wasn't wartime, but still, they trained like it could have popped off again. But anyway, here while I was sitting, I'm going to wait, my girlfriend's going to come out, we're going to get married. Right? I can promise you, the last 15 years, people weren't coming out of boot camp and out of their schools thinking that. They might have been, but the writing's on the wall, right? For like Matthew said, he came out of his school of infantry 7 months, and he spent 7 months training up to go to war, you know, to go to a war zone. So it's a little different nowadays.
See,
I don't think people are. I don't know about you, but I don't think people are joining the military right now, not thinking they have the chance to go into a combat zone.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I've been a little disconnected over the last several years from recruiting. I mean, I still run into sailors that, you know, being in the reserve still, that are, you know, out there doing stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, like back in my day, it was the Cold War. We were still doing.
You're at the end of the Cold War.
Because it was different.
I mean, in boot camp, our free time at night, our 45 minutes of free time at night to write letters home and everything, was called commie time. And it was called commie time because while we were writing letters home, the commies were training to kill us. Right. So Cold War, the communists, and, you know, the whole deal.
Yeah, because, I mean, we were still doing, back when I was in the late 80s, we were still doing some pretty interesting missions.
Yeah.
It was different than...
Well, there was tension. Definitely international tension.
It wasn't like, you know, as someone who served, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the warfighter. You know, there's a lot of stuff you hear, you know, even now today when we're doing our drills and we go out to lunch or something, and, you know, people come up and they say, thank you for your service. And I think to myself, you know, I get it. And it's awkward to figure out how to appropriately respond to people that, you know, thank you for your service. Because there's guys that, like your nephew, that, you know, suffered pretty traumatic injuries. I haven't really suffered a whole lot in 30 years.
Right.
You know, maybe some missed birthdays, missed anniversaries, missed Christmas stuff.
Yeah, but nothing from
like
the military aspect.
Yeah, nothing from combat related injuries. I mean, I was deployed for 10 months in Kuwait.
The Vietnam vet sitting at the table drinking some coffee, or counter drinking some coffee, and this guy walks in his army guy walks in his camis. At least when I was in the military, the Marines didn't wear their camis. You could wear your camis to the base and home,
right?
But you couldn't wear them out around town, right? I think that has subsequently changed. I don't know, but anyway, he walks in, and everyone in the restaurant say, "Hey, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service." And this army guy that came in the door with his camis on noticed the vet sitting at the counter. Didn't say anything, but went down, sat down, and this little kid came up, said, "Hey, can I take a picture with you?" And the mom took a picture and everything else. And the Vietnam vet, they're showing it from his perspective, and he's kind of feeling like what the hell, you know?
Right.
And all of a sudden, there's a tap on his shoulder, and it's the little kid. And he says, "Hey, can I get my picture with you too?" And the guy was surprised and was like, "Sure." And he says, that guy told me you're a hero too." And he said, "Which guy?" And the kid points to the kid in the camouflage. Right? So it's that connection. He ain't saying to the guy walking in,
right?
But he noticed it. I do it all the time. If I'm walking around and I see 3 to 6 years, we talked about this with Matt, right?
Yeah.
3 to 6 years, all the World War II guys are gonna be gone, right? So if I'm walking around anywhere in public and I see old guy with a World War II hat on, Vietnam or veteran or Vietnam, any veteran hat, I go up and say thank you for your service. I did it the other day, and this guy was walking with a cane, and he literally had to pick up the cane in his hand, and I just kind of fist bumped him because he couldn't, he wasn't getting around real well.
You know what? I'm sorry. It reminds me of a funny story because my dad has a USS Omaha hat, all ratted, beat up. My dad never served, but he wears that hat all the time because he loves that hat. Love you, Pops. And people come up to him. He's in a wheelchair. They think he's a veteran, and they thank him for his service. So you got to be careful when you thank somebody.
Yeah.
Now my dad's a humble guy, so he doesn't.
Sure.
He doesn't abuse that or whatever. But it's like
He probably says my kids serve.
He does. I don't know exactly what he says when it happens, but it's just funny because it's happened to him several times. He's in San Diego, so we're out and about.
Oh, yeah,
but it just reminded me because you make that assumption that the person served, but you really don't.
Yeah.
You don't know.
And what's interesting about it is, like, again, I'm kind of stuck on this topic because the connection that you have with people, right? So, my nephew Bobby went in the military right after his graduation, a month later. And then a year or two later is when he got hit by an IED. He lost both his legs. And my wife said, "Hey, Bobby just lost his legs in the military. Or in Afghanistan." And I was like, "Yeah, baloney, whatever." She goes, "No, I'm serious." And she starts crying and stuff, and I was just like, and then it hit me. Because I knew he was over there. Right? And I knew he was in combat. It didn't really hit me until they said, "Hey, he lost both his legs in Afghanistan." And then when we drove down to see him, 10 days later, he's in Bethesda in Maryland, and we drove down to see him. And you know what he told me? And we're going to get into this. I don't want to kind of spoil it too much because we're going to interview him. He's actually right now today, this past week, out in New York, I think, tryouts for the U.S. national team.
Nice.
For sled hockey. Anyway, he looked up at me and said, he was 19 years old. He looked up at me and said, "This will not define me as a person. Like, losing my legs is not the end of my life. It's the beginning of my life."
Right.
And he celebrates his Alive Day. A lot of wounded warriors celebrate their Alive Days. It's the days that they didn't. It's the date that they got wounded but didn't die. That's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's interesting about that too is, and I just think off the cuff with this, is the people around him that maybe didn't lose a limb and their thoughts about that should have been me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's guilt, right? So there's
absolutely.
There's guilt of that. There's guilt. I think that more comes into play when and Leif Babin and Jocko have talked about this because they lost men under their command in combat. I had a friend in the Marine Corps that wrote me a letter also that lost men in combat. When you lose someone in combat, that guilt is there, like, what could I have done better? What could I have done better to save him? What? And Leif's talked about it pretty openly, and it took him a long time. He still deals with it, but it took him a long time to understand that, he did what he thought he needed to do at the time, and in essence, shit happens still, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any easier, Sometimes when I'm with Bobby, or I'm thinking about Bobby, or I'm in a situation where we're talking about him, like even right now, I get more emotional about it than he does, right?
Yeah.
So, because he lived with it, he's dealt with it. It's just that esprit de corps and that connection, and when you see these guys and their stories, and there's guys that are inspirational about it, and there's guys that are really, really struggling, right? They haven't assimilated back into society. I mean, there's the whole gamut of it, and it makes you 22 veterans commit suicide every day, right? One active duty and 22 veterans are committing suicide every day in this country. And I don't want to get into the political aspects of it and stuff, but the reality is, it takes a second to say thank you for your service. It takes a second just to call up a buddy that was in the military with you and say, "Hey, how are you doing?"
Right.
I've lost people since getting out of the military, people that I was in the military with. We didn't see combat, okay? None of these guys I was in the military with saw combat, and these guys still struggled, and some are still struggling for years, right? And we've lost some because of those struggles,
Right.
whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. Let alone these guys that have gone over and seen what they've seen and done what they've done, you know. And you know what the interesting thing on that too is, rarely will you hear someone talk about, I did it for the flag, I did it for the, you know, they're doing it for their buddy next to
Right.
them and their buddy over here, and they want to make sure they all get home because they've been handed a mission. It's not optional. You don't have the option. Nah, sorry, I don't want to go on a patrol today. Yeah, that you step up and you go on the patrol.
Right.
But you're going to go on a patrol, and you're not going to think about yourself. You're going to think about your buddies. I'm going to make sure these guys get home to their wives, to their kids, to their whatever. And that's really where their focus is. And that right there, that's immeasurable.
I think that's the concept that some businesses don't understand the value of. I mean, even in my company today, you don't really see, my boss and I were talking about this today, you don't really see the work ethic and the commitment to other people. I think the evolution of change has been so much that we are all focused on our own self-interest.
We live in a very selfish society.
Yeah, we're not concerned
Not
about,
maybe consciously, but you're right.
No, I think we do it consciously.
Well, so I think a lot of people do, but we're just become a very selfish society.
But I think that it's been lost in the workforce that, you know, I didn't stay in the military for 30 years for the retirement. I guess in some way I did. You know, you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to have this benefit when I'm done. But just like the statistics say that people typically don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. You know, so that connection with people are important. You know, and if you can't connect with people, then you're going to move on to a different job, a different career, a different position or whatever, just because, you know, your interactions with a particular person is different from one to the next. When your bosses change, sometimes your whole want to be somewhere or not want to be somewhere changes. It's just the way things work.
Sure.
You know?
You know what's interesting, I find, maybe you found this in the military too when you were on active duty? I found that on active duty, like, you go through a command change, and undoubtedly the new command coming in is going to change some things.
Yep.
You know, your training will be different, you'll do different things and stuff. And what I found interesting in the military was, while you might piss and moan about it, it don't matter. You're going to go do it, right?
Yeah.
In the civilian world, you can piss and moan about it, and it affects morale, and then people, you know what I mean? It's just different. It's just a different kind of, I guess, approach, maybe?
I think that the term they're using today is transparency, right? So when you go from one boss to another boss to another boss, it's supposed to be a transparent evolution. There are going to be some things that change, but it shouldn't change the overall mission.
Correct.
So, you know, in let's use my department, the cheese department. The mission of the cheese department is to make good product, keep cost and waste down, quality up, get the product, you know, out the door, right?
Correct.
That
Production
mission
rates and
doesn't change if the production manager changes.
Correct.
So it's the task and processes within that mission that make a little bit of difference. And so good.
That's ultimately in the military too.
Well, so what I was going to say is, in the military, typically officers in charge or commanding officers understand that, even though they want to leave their legacy. Because let's face it, most commanders in the military, whether it's a ship, whether it's a short command, whether it's whatever it is, they want to leave their legacy. They want to leave their mark because their ego, they didn't get to that place because, you know, there's some ego involved. And we talked about that in our leadership stuff, but there's some ego involved. So they want to leave their mark on their command, whether it's 2 years or 20 years, right?
Yep.
But they understand that at the same time, the mission still needs to be completed. So you change some things in the process and the tasks that need to be accomplished, but you don't change the mission.
Correct.
And so
the commander's intent may tweak, but it's the same mission, right? I mean,
right.
You're defending the country ultimately is the ultimate thing. But
so to keep people focused and keep morale up, the thing I think gets lost, and I've seen it a little bit in different companies I've worked for in the civilian sector, is they focus on the processes and the task versus the overall mission. And when you focus on the process and the task, you get strife, you get conflict, you get resentment, you get problems. But when you focus on the mission and you keep everybody focused on that end goal mission, things are a lot better.
Yeah, so in the business world, you'll hear a lot of different analogies and things about that, right? And I always use the example of, if you have people that aren't focusing on the mission, that they can get easily distracted, and it can be distractions from negative,
right?
The negative Nancy's or whatever. It can be because negativity is contagious quickly.
Yeah, it's easier contagious.
Yeah. They got real life going on, outside of work. They got stuff going on. A lot of different things. So, you mentioned the methods or the training and the focusing on the mission and stuff. I have a friend at work that he's been spending a lot of time the last 3 years at one of our facilities. He's now coming over to our other facility, back to our other facility, and he's our continuous improvement champion. And so he's kind of spearheading, if you will, continuous improvement within the company.
Right.
And he's done some phenomenal. He and the team, because he didn't do any of it by himself.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, continuous improvement is not just his job; it's everyone's job. He's just facilitating it.
Right.
He and the team over in our other facility have done an amazing work. Now he's coming over here to work with the team in the other facility to have at it over here. Anyway, yesterday he was talking about man, method, and machine. Right? So you got to worry about the man, you got to worry about, so manpower, the methods, and then the equipment, right? So think about it that in the military aspect, the commanders and leaders in the military are thinking the exact same thing. There they call it beans, bullets, bandages. There's all these old analogies. You got to worry about the beans, which is food, feeding my troops. The bullets, obviously the ammo and whatever else you need, and then the bandages for the wounded. So, but it's the same thing, man, method, machines. The method is how we train, what we're training and how we're training. The equipment is either what we've been given or what we've acquired. But the key point there is the people. So not only do you have to maintain your equipment, and I was in the Marine Corps, so in the infantry. So we had any downtime, we were cleaning our weapons, right? So there'd be days we'd go over to the armory, check our weapon out, clean it all day, turn it back in at the end of the day. The next day, get up and do the exact same thing, right? Take care of your equipment, but you're learning the discipline during that and stuff like this. So you brought that up earlier, and that's kind of this long-winded point I'm making, is you got to worry about the equipment, you got to worry about the methods and the processes, and you got to worry about the people. So it's everything we've talked about with leadership within an organization too. Yep. Same thing in the military. They just, again, Leif and Jocko from Extreme Ownership, their jobs now out of the military, they're going and teaching people leadership from what they learned in the military and applying it to business. So it's exactly what you were talking about. Anyway, that was my long-winded.
We'll call that a rant.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things, and I struggle with it because my boss and I were talking about it a little bit today. In the environment that we're in the culture of the organization that we work for, it's very difficult to lead. And it's one of those things that you have to prepare people for leadership. Because if you don't, what do you
relate
it to...
You mean to be a leader or to follow a leader?
No.
You mean to follow a leader.
Hear me out. We talked about it a little bit with the breaking you down, building you back up. It's no different in business. When you're trying to create efficiencies and get people focused on the mission and all that stuff, you have to break people down and build them back up. So what I mean is that the organization isn't ready for the type of leadership that they want. So people aren't ready to be led because they haven't been, for lack of a better term, broken down and built back up. Yeah. So how do you go about that process in a company, especially in a company that has very old traditional values?
So you're saying the company's at A, they want to be at E. You can't go from A to E.
No.
You got to go A, B, C, D. I mean, you got to go through the steps. You got to go through the process.
And until you recognize that that is something that you need to do, you have to prepare people for leadership. And it's something that I've kind of learned over the last several months of being in this master's program, only because I've focused attention on it, because I've had to, right, to get good grades and blah, blah, blah.
It's conscious.
It's really something that's coming more and more full circle for me, understanding, because the conversation I had with my boss today was, I have to manage the shift, not lead the shift. And he looked at me odd. And then
Who said that?
I said that.
Okay.
Because the leadership principles that I've tried to use with the shift haven't worked. And it's one of those things where you have to kind of decipher what's going on to figure out what methods may work. And what I've realized over the last probably week is that it's a shift in an environment that has to be managed, not led. Because the people aren't ready to be led.
Okay, so let me ask you a question on that, because I know you enough and we've talked about this enough that means that's a very distinct definition for you.
Yes.
So, because you've said it before. So, you can lead, and we've talked about it on the podcast. You can be a leader or you can be a manager.
Yep.
Right? Manager can be a leader, but if you're just managing a department, if you're just managing a shift, then in essence, what I hear you saying and what I think you're thinking is, because they're not ready, because the whole environment isn't ready, you're just going to maintain. You're going to manage it, make sure yep, we're going to hit our quotas, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I'm going to make sure the people in the right spots, but I'm not inspiring anyone, I'm not educating anyone,
There's a big difference.
Yeah, okay.
So so for me, that's a very difficult place to be.
Absolutely, because I know you want to live in the lead part. Managers are a dime a dozen. Leaders are special.
Well, and the thing is, you have no leaders if you have no followers.
Correct.
So if people aren't taught, trained to follow, they don't understand what it is. They don't understand what's going on.
And that's where leaders bring in the inspiration to understand that.
You got to educate people as to why we're doing things. And I think focusing on the mission is the way to make that happen. And there's tons of books, there's tons of principles out there and all that kind of stuff. You really got to figure out what works for the environment that you're in. And that's what I'm really starting to learn.
You have to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not easy either.
No. So an interesting point that to build on what you just said. First I have a comment and then I have a question. Okay?
Okay.
The comment is focusing on the mission, getting the team to focus on the mission. I think we've talked about this before. It's the why, right?
Yep.
So even the Navy SEALs in their combat situations found that they could train all day. They could train for a mission. They could practice a mission. They could rehearse for a mission. They told the team the whys. Now in the military, it's a little different. They went around the approach of, we're going to teach everyone the why in case the person who is leading falls and someone's got to step up. Now they all understand the why, so the mission can continue, right? The real life and death issues of combat in a company. Understanding the why is really more part of the inspirational. Hey, someone might come into work every day, punch the clock, run their machine, and go home, and not understand how they fit into the big picture, not understand what they're doing, how it impacts the mission and the values of the company,
right.
Or the KPI, the key performance indicators, KPIs, things like that. So I think what I heard you saying was, trying, a leader in your position, if you were able to lead right now, you'd be educating the people in that, and then that in itself, people would naturally then want to,
right.
We want to support the mission. In your situation now where you feel you have to manage it, you're pretty much just, I'm going to make sure the numbers are right. I'm going to make sure the people in the right spots. But it's not.
Quo.
Yeah.
Status quo.
And that's dangerous. So here's my question for you. If you could change anything you wanted in your exact current situation,
yep.
do you have like, man, if I could just do this, or if the company would just do this, or is it more of a bigger cultural?
I don't think it's that simple. But so my production manager and plant manager and HR manager are trying to do that. I think that it is paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to act, right?
Yep.
So you analyze, you collect data. At some point, you got to act, right? Plan, do, check, act. So at some point, you have to make a decision, and you have to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. But you have to also let people know that we may adjust this.
This is why we're doing it.
We're starting here. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. We're starting here, and this is the end goal. If we adjust,
We're gonna.
But
it's okay to be wrong.
That's my frustration is that, we need to put more emphasis on training. I think a lot of what we struggle with can be fixed with proper training. So that means, hey, you know what? Instead of your 8-hour shift, you're going to work a 10-hour shift because we're going to do training for 2 hours. And it might be on leadership topics. It may be on team building topics. It might not have anything to do with
them turning
the
a button.
process.
Yeah, hitting a button on a piece of equipment.
And I think
so. What did you spend in the military? What did you spend most of your time doing?
90% was training.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
So in the military, you train. So at a company I used to work at, we had a guy come in to teach us 5S, right? And 5S is in essence a organizational lean principle. Everything has a place. Everything should be in its place. Things like that. And he asked the fundamental question: why do 5S? And it kind of the military uses 5S to like the nth degree, right? Everything has a place. Everything is in its place. Right. On a ship, I'm sure. On a submarine, for sure. So imagine there's a fire on a submarine. The lights are out, and you have to go grab the hose.
And it's not there.
And it's not there.
Or it doesn't work.
You train enough to know, I know exactly where that hose is. I'm going to be able to get to it, and I'm going to be able to grab it, right? So anyway, he asked, why does the military use it and everything else, And no one else in the room had been in the military and stuff. And they were like, well, so they're organized. And I said, because people die if you don't. Right? and he was like, you're right. That's why they do it. People can die if you don't.
Right.
So if it's that Navy corpsman with the Fleet Marine Force, and he's got a sucking chest wound, and he has to get a piece of plastic and put it on the chest wound, and he can't find a piece of plastic.
Yep.
So there's a lot of parallels, if you will, similarities between the military and civilian, if you will, business life. There's some stark differences too. But really the biggest stark difference is when you're told to do something in the military, you go do it. For the most part, right? I mean, lawful order. They talk about lawful orders. Right. If you're given a lawful order, you're expected to follow the lawful order. In the civilian world, you would like to think that that's true. Your boss tells you to go do something. Okay, I go do it. You, in your situation, you're supervising X number of people. You may tell this person, that person's going to do it differently than this person doing it. In the military, those three people are expected to do it the same. Right? And at a high level. And if not, there's extracurricular activities that can motivate people
to do it right.
To learn it and do it right. So you have extracurricular training, all these little terms.
Well, you don't take a weapon apart and put it back together differently every time.
Right. We used to race doing it. Honestly, we used to race breaking down an M16 and putting it back together to the point where we did it blindfolded, and we'd be doing it. We'd break it down and put it back together in 32 seconds, and that's complete assembly. And then we started doing it on an M60 machine gun, and our M60 machine gunner would break down an M60 and put it back together with a blindfold on in like 55 seconds. It was truly amazing, but it's because it's just all repetition. You know exactly what to reach, where to go with your eyes closed. A submarine. Think about a submarine. You're 300 feet below the surface of the water, and the lights go out. Or even you're just getting out of your rack, and you got to go to the bathroom, and the lights out.
There's a lot of repetition.
It's all repetition. It's all so in the military. So business. Now take this back to business. You can build that repetition in business. You do it through good habits. You form good habits. You perform good habits.
It's just difficult because people are so focused on their own needs. And, so I work in a union shop, and I don't have anything for or against unions. But
you're not part of the union.
I'm not, no.
Yeah.
But the entitlement of what they think they should get because they've worked for the union for 20 years, to me doesn't make sense. Just because you've worked for 20 years and you're in the union Some folks believe that they don't have to do anything anymore. If I show up, that is enough because I've already paid my dues, and I've already, and I don't mean literally paid dues. I mean figuratively paid dues. So I don't really have to do anything. I don't have to do what you say because I've been in the union 20 years. So I'm going to do my job the way that I want to. And so to me, that's a problem because the job should be done pretty similar to the same way. Consistency.
Process approach should be followed the same way every time.
Making cheese is about consistency.
Absolutely.
So just like probably any manufacturing industry. So you can't have consistency and efficiencies if people don't do the same things the same way. So I go back, and I've had this conversation with my boss several times. I go back to, if we want to lead people, we need to train people. We are not, in my opinion, we are not in a position to lead. We're in a position to manage, and until we change that culture of preparing people to be led, it's not going to happen.
Did he just listen, or did he give you a report?
No, he's a great guy, and he understands it. It's just the challenge of how do you get everybody on the same page to
right,
right.
That cultural direction.
It's a challenge.
All right, so I got a question for you. In your travels in the military, what was the best place and the worst place you ever went?
Hong Kong by far was the best place. God, that was so much fun.
I spent 5 days of Liberty in Hong Kong.
That's what I was. 5 days of Liberty in Hong Kong. Just an amazing place if you ever get a chance to go.
When were you there?
1990.
Yeah, so I was there in like 92, I think.
Yeah,
we got to man the rails of an LST coming in. We were on a ship, LST, which is a flat bottom ship. So the worst kind of ship to be on in a storm. No keel. Anyway, we manned the rails, and it was so foggy you couldn't see the guy next to you almost. But we had to man the rails anyway because we had to. Nobody could freaking see us. But it was a cool experience.
Yeah,
but Hong Kong was pretty cool.
We anchored out. We were tied to a tender. And, just a phenomenal time.
Yeah, it was cool.
By far.
And that was, like when I was there in 92, it went back over to China in 97, I believe. And in 92, they were already, like there were T-shirts you could buy with the British flag being painted over with the Chinese flag and stuff. So they were already like, that was 5 years ahead, but they were already gearing up to go back to China and stuff. Yep. Whether it was propaganda or not, it was there.
And I have to say that when I got deployed to Kuwait, I did 4 days in Qatar. Phenomenal time. I mean, I have videos and pictures from being out there, and it was probably, I hate to say this, but it was probably some of the most fun I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah. We
got to swim in the Gulf. We went on this crazy sand dune ride with this just maniac Arabic driving dude. We went to this huge mall in town, and then we went out and.
That's probably what got you in the Jeeps.
It had something to do with it, but just those two places. The worst place in the military?
Well, let me rephrase that. So maybe not the worst place. The
most challenging situation? I could tell you.
The place that you would prefer never to go back to.
God, I really can't think of one. I think that.
So I asked that. It was a trick question. Okay, so because if you had asked me the same question, I would have said the same thing. I really can't. I can think of some really crappy situations I was in.
Right.
But I'd still do it again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd still go again.
From a personal development standpoint, from a figuring out how to get through things standpoint, being on a submarine in the Cold War was challenging. We did some crazy stuff. Some scary stuff that I can't talk about or I'd have to kill you. But, just really cool missions that I don't know that we do today. We may or we may not. But it's tough because those are things you can't talk about. They're internalized. Yeah, there's.
You know what's interesting about that too as a submariner? You're doing things like that, and you, like, okay, I'm driving around in a Humvee, or I'm marching up a mountain, or whatever, riding a helicopter, whatever.
Right.
You're in a metal boat underwater. Like, you can't just, I'm going to step outside for a minute.
Yeah, get some air.
Yeah. You can't, I'm going to escape through this door to, So there's that added pressure. right? There's added pressure. There's also, and I'm gonna ask this. This is a question, but I'm gonna ask it in a different way. Could probably, I don't know, whatever. So, you watch the movies about submarines and stuff.
Yep.
And in those tense moments, you got to have absolute silence. True?
Yep.
Reality?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So the added pressure. Yeah, you got to have noise discipline in the military, in the Marines, and everything else in various situations. But if you're out going around in oceans that, they're not advertising you're in, and you're on these missions to recon and listen and do whatever, or track, whatever. There's situations where you gotta have absolute silence.
Yep.
You gotta. That's just some.
It's
pressure.
not called a silent service for nothing.
Yeah, but it's that pressure that's on you, even during peacetime. Peacetime meaning the submarine's not shooting.
Yeah, but
stuff.
I don't think you think about it because you're trained.
No, I'm
to
saying
it all the time.
for me on the outside.
Oh, right.
You're used to it because you're living it,
Yep.
right? But the reality is, you get used to that, living in that. So like, if you're airborne, right? If you're in the Army or Air Force or even any of the branches that do jumps, there's guys that have done thousands and thousands of jumps. It's like waking up to them. They don't care. Let's go get up in a plane and jump out, or go get up in a helo and jump out.
Right.
Versus the new guy, right? That's never done it.
Right.
So you're in a submarine, you're living it, you're doing it every day. But from the outside looking in, I spent 30 days on a Navy ship. I didn't have to worry about noise discipline. I just had to do my job and whatever.
Right. We
We would go PT on the deck, and the Navy guys would sit there and think we're idiots and whatever. But you had to live in that, and there were probably, I'm going to assume, there were times where that was an extended period of time.
Oh yeah.
Where you had to have noise discipline. You had to have
57 days was the longest I've been underwater.
Underwater the whole
time.
57 days. That's pretty remarkable.
It's
right?
It's nuts, But you go through those experiences and you think that that's. Whenever I have tough times today, I always reflect back on my young years of being in the Navy and say, you know what, if I can go through that, I can. This is a piece of cake.
I've had situations where people have, because I'm not in the best shape right now.
I would
of
never
my life.
notice that.
I know. I'm big boned. I am, by the way, but anyway, that's a whole other story. So, people have underestimated me based on my physical condition and or my attitude from time to time.
Right.
And the reality is, I've questioned myself because we both, if we've been through the military long enough, you've done some pretty challenging things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people have even questioned my nephew on his toughness. Right? I laugh it off, and I don't really say much about it to the people that have questioned me or said things to me, because I know the truth. I know that if something happened, we talked about this with the CPL, right? You hope you never have to, but if put in a situation, could you respond?
Yeah.
I'm confident I don't have to worry about that, right?
Right.
If put in a situation and I had to respond, I'd respond.
Right.
But I don't have to go around bragging about that, and I don't have to go around telling people that, and I don't have to go around changing people's attitude about that.
Right.
Right? But when somebody questions my nephew on his toughness or whatever, it's mind-boggling, and I think it goes back to what you had said earlier about selfishness, right? We're just in a society of being selfish. Today, I'd be really interested to know why some high schoolers coming out of high school and wants to join the military today. I'd really like to know that. I may ask one. I may find a young Marine somewhere and ask them that. And if they haven't deployed overseas yet, I joined to go to war, and I think if they deploy, they're going to come back with a different answer.
Probably.
But it would be interesting. I think it would be interesting to meet a younger
Maybe
Marine.
we can do a show.
Matthew's not that old, but he's been out for 12, 13 years.
Yeah, no, you definitely want to get a younger person's perspective.
Yeah, because it would be interesting, because you and I both talked about different reasons why we joined.
Yeah.
And again, we said those reasons are probably still valid for some people today, but it would be really interesting to know because it goes back to the esprit de corps, the connection you have with people that have been in the military. And listen, if you haven't, if you choose not to thank a veteran for their service, okay, they didn't do it for your thanks. I didn't do it for thanks.
Right.
You know, it's appreciated, right? When somebody says something like that, I go to Home Depot and I get a military discount, so I take advantage of that, right? I show them my super old ID and say, yeah, like I was in the military a long time ago. They say thank you for your service every time. Okay, well, thank you. You're saving me 10%. You know,
right.
What the hell? But anyway, if you have it in you, Matthew mentioned the 2-finger flip wave just make connections with humans. Well, go up to a veteran and say thank you for your service. You know, not a big deal, but it means a lot to a lot of guys.
Yeah, it does for sure. Especially those that have served before. The ones that are serving now, it doesn't mean as much, to be honest.
I've heard some of them like get irritated by it.
Yeah, it's really more for someone. I would say from someone who's still
older
in.
generation.
Well, no, not even that. For someone that's in, it doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, it's appreciated.
Well, I'm talking even guys that are out now, but have been like we're in combat and stuff.
But those guys it makes a difference too. Guys that are serving right now, I don't think it makes as much difference. Just my own personal opinion.
Well, and I think there's legitimacy to that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we've had some pretty good discussions. I think you and I could talk about this for
hours,
for hours and hours and hours. We can't. Mike's got to go to work. But so in closing, I know from my perspective, if you're a young person or a parent of a young person and they're thinking of going into the military, there's a lot of benefits from going into the military, and not just college or not just experiences. If you go in and you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get a lot out of it, and it's going to stay with you the rest of your life.
Absolutely. I can't even tell you how many people when I was recruiting that I talked to that said, man, I wish I would have stayed in. Man, I wish I would have stayed in. And it's not all just about the retirement stuff. It's also just because, you know, the relationships that you build and the experience that you have are just unparalleled in the civilian sector. And so, you know, I may be biased, but I definitely think if you have a young person that wants to join, you're the parent of a young person, we would all have concerns about them going into combat. The reality is that there are not a lot of those folks going into combat. There's probably a group of Marines that are going in. There's a group of Army forces that are going in, Air Force. You know,
proportionally, it's not everyone. It's not. There's probably people that have served in the military that haven't deployed to a combat zone.
Right.
Like you'd think everyone deploys to a combat zone. It's not true.
No. I mean, I have friends that have been in the Navy for 25 years that have never stepped foot on a ship. So,
yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot of different...
It's a lot of misconceptions, potentially, about the military.
There's a lot of different things that people can do. So don't get too wrapped up on, oh, my poor baby's going to go to war and die. Is that risk there? Yeah, but it's pretty small. So...
Yeah. So I think in closing here, I loved my time in the military. There's a part of me that wishes I would have stayed in the military. But you're still in the military.
Yep.
Doing your thing outside the military and inside the military. You're going to drill weekend, I think, this weekend, right? Or next weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to Minnesota.
So if you're interested in it, look it up. Go research. There's a lot out there right now.
In 1997, there was no internet. So I had no idea what I was getting into. There was no YouTube. There was no Facebook. There was
no VHS tapes.
Nothing.
that were videoed up.
I didn't even get to watch that.
Yeah.
So, you know, do your research. Ask people. You'd be surprised. You might have ancestors, friends, family that have served that can share their experiences with you. So, you know.
And also
continue the conversation.
You can learn a skill in the military.
For sure.
You can learn multiple skills in the military.
I'm almost 50 and I'm still using the post 9/11 GI Bill. If that tells you anything. I mean, it basically.
I use mine. Yeah.
Got my bachelor's with my GI Bill, and now I'm getting my master's with. Pretty much paid for by the military. You know, I got some student loans or whatever, but the bulk of it was paid for by the military.
Absolutely. So again, if you're interested in the military, whether you want to join or whether you're just interested in the military, leave us some comments. If you have any questions that maybe we can answer, we can give you our thoughts or opinions. We didn't really get into a whole bunch of stories of where we were and what we were doing.
Probably better that we did.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and it might be what stays in.
That may be a different show.
Anyway, leave us some comments, feedback, questions if you have them. We'll be glad to answer them, or point you in the right direction if we can't answer them. I think it was one of the best decisions I made in my life. I know that.
It definitely was for me.
Yeah,
hands down, no question about it.
So, until next week. Next week, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
We'll come up with something.
We'll come up with something. It'll be interesting and fun. And until then, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, that does it for this week's show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Two Guys in a Podcast.